I don't want no oil spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, together Rebecca and I are going to bring you an unforgettable hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your family and your pets and the people and the birds and around you and the little critters and the bugs and pretty much everybody and everything, because all of us are tied up together in this wonderful wibbly wobbly ball of a planet called Earth. Got a good show for you today, but I have to kind of preface it with a little bit of how should I say this? I might be a little bit off because I got invited to a very nice 4th of July celebration yesterday, and you know, I say at the start, we always talk about health and wealth and health and happiness. Well, sometimes the health thing can contradict the happiness thing a little bit because, normally I'm like a one glass of wine 3 times a night or 3 times a week kind of guy, but I was doing some shots there, and I'm not sure exactly what all of them were, and so I'm kind of a little off my game this morning. And so I'm looking for help. I'm looking for a little assistance from the audience today because this is a call-in show, and we welcome your calls and we welcome your texts. And you can call in at any time at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. And or you can text at 419-973-5841 on any environmental or ecological topic. And also this week, unfortunately, I was unable to secure a guest for the show. Normally we have a guest in the second quarter of the show, and I was talking to like 3 different people, and somehow it didn't come through with any of them. Some of them are a good possibility for being on the show next week, but we're going to talk in the second half of the show. The first half, we're just going to chat a little bit here. Second quarter, we're going to talk about what happened in Washington, D.C. there, the recent Supreme Court decision eliminating the EPA's authority to be the EPA. Then we're going to hear from our wonderful advertisers and patrons. And then Rebecca is going to be discussing what exactly?
Hammerhead worms.
Hammerhead worms. And that sounds fairly disgusting.
Yeah, I do not find them attractive. Probably the feeling is mutual, but, that's just my take on it. I end up not liking them. Perhaps it's irrational, but I don't.
Right. Well, and then we'll there's a whole bunch of ecological news to talk about, and that's our show. And like I say, this week I'm really looking for some call-ins or some texts or, we're asking for a lifeline here, folks, on For a Green Future. So this party I went to last night was at the home of a good friend of mine, a fella I worked with for a long time, in a really dirty, dangerous factory setting, and he is actually a Cuban immigrant. He immigrated legally from Cuba, and I just want to say that there's a movement. There's suggestions on the internet that those of us who are more, how should I say, more liberal, more progressive, that we shouldn't be celebrating like the 4th of July because things are so terrible now. But the thing is, things are very, very challenging right now for freedom, for the United States of America. But we can't give up celebrating. Celebrating is a human thing. And if you just become this grim, I can't have a party until the world is fixed kind of person, you're not going to enjoy life very much. And
my far left friends like to get together and have anti-4th of July parties sometimes.
Well, yeah, if you have an anti-party, that's okay. That's something.
To some extent, I feel like it's sort of like the universal midsummer festival, the American version. But yeah, I won't go to the fireworks or wear red, white, and blue anymore.
I see. Well, you're not alone. There's a lot of people who feel that way. But I'm just making the point that you gotta keep the joy in your life. You've got to, I'm
for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad I went. They're wonderful people. We had a great time. There was dancing, there was Latin music and Cuban Afro pop music that we were all dancing to. Me and my awkward middle-aged white guy way, and them in much better ways than me. They're much better dancers as a group. Everybody there was. I was probably the worst dancer there. I'll just admit it right up front. But no one was injured, and that's the important thing, right?
Yes, yeah.
But my main point is that it's a celebration of democracy. And, as a Green, one of our 10 key values is grassroots democracy. And if our democracy were functioning properly, the will of the majority on a whole bunch of things like environmental issues would be expressed in what our government is doing. But right now,
we've been getting record amount of honks at pro-choice demonstrations anymore. It's like the people of Ohio even are not on board with this. It's kind of comforting to realize that actually we do deserve better than the government decisions we're getting.
Right, and those decisions are being controlled by a minority of the people, and every survey is showing the country is in like a roughly a 65-35 split on most of these issues, like global warming, like doing something to protect the environment. The vast majority of people want to do it. They want stronger environmental laws. They want us to fix the climate. But that 35% are that's who's in charge. That's who's making the decisions. And this has been a long time coming. And, it's not something that we can be proud of, but there is such a thing as railing the troops. There's such a thing as basically how people are feeling. And there's no point in becoming, depressed about everything, because then you don't do anything. And then that 35% is that much easier for them to control everything. So
yeah, I think when the decision came down about Roe v. Wade, a couple friends of mine had a dance-off in a hospital parking lot, and I did a very hostile God's eye. We're all kind of coping the best way we can.
yeah. That decision shocked the world basically. But not far behind it is the decision to prevent the EPA from regulating carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. And that decision has very far-reaching implications because, like with the Roe v. Wade, basically the Supreme Court said that the Environmental Protection Agency, because it's a branch of the government, the executive branch, they can't regulate things like CO2 unless they're specifically told to do that by the legislative branch. So if there was a law passed saying that CO2 is a greenhouse gas and the EPA needs to regulate it, then the EPA could regulate it according to the Supreme Court decision. But until they do that, they can't. Which, once again, if we had a successfully democratic government that represented the will of the people, passing a law like that would be no problem. But right now, the way things have been gerrymandered and rigged, and essentially the way the system has been cheated and gamed, it would be impossible to pass that kind of legislation right now. And so we're in a situation where something has to be done right now. I mean, there literally is no more time to think about how we're going to approach this. I mean, we have approaches. We've got wind power, we got solar power, things that we report on all the time here that can solve this problem and need to be instituted. But it needs to be done right away. It needs to be done without pause, without the delays that, sometimes decades-long delays that going through this rigged political process can cause, because we literally do not have that much time. So I don't know. What do you folks think? 877-909-1007. What do you think of this decision by the Supreme Court to prevent the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, prevent it from protecting the environment? I'm very curious to see what people have to say about this.
I just realized I actually am, technically speaking, wearing red, white, and blue with a little bit of black, and the blue might actually be teal, but whatever.
Well, I won't hold it against you. One time I was when I was a Green in Western New York, and I ran for office. I ran for a village council seat, and I did pretty well. I got like 35% of the vote or whatever. And at the after party, I sang the national anthem, which, some people were actually offended because I sang the national anthem. They're like, "Oh, that's a song that glorifies violence," and so forth. But, I can't be too politically correct. I just, I try, but then I'm like, but I love the national anthem.
It also sort of brags about, we're not going to tolerate this. We're not slaves like the people we enslave, in one verse. And reportedly also is misogynistic. So, but I don't know. It's the 1800s. What you going to do?
Yeah. And that question, at the end, does the Star-Spangled Banner yet wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave? To me, that's a vital question these days. How brave are Americans today? How free are Americans today? And
there was a move for a while to make America the Beautiful the national anthem. I understood, and I like that one because it has that thing, America, America, God mend thine every flaw, which carries in it the acknowledgement that we started this. We built the car broken and have been trying to fix it on the fly ever since, basically, while rolling.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. It's always going to be a work in progress, but towards a more perfect union. It's
I'd love for it to work. I have some misgivings, but I'd love for it to work.
Yeah. So there's an argument to be made for that, and that certainly is more lyrical and talks about the amber waves of grain and the mountains.
It's very pretty, also.
It's definitely the prettier show, but there is one thing though that is being talked about, amongst certain circles, the idea that maybe we shouldn't be having so many fireworks shows.
Yeah.
And I'm conflicted on that one because I love fireworks. I'm going to the fireworks tonight in Bowling Green with a bunch of friends.
Do they all have to be boomy though? Aren't some of them a little bit quieter?
Well, yeah. It's a question of design as to how loud.
There are those ones that just make noise and a bright flash, and that's all they do, and they don't even make pretty flowers. I don't see the point of those.
Yeah, it's a question of how thick is the wall of the shell, because, anytime you have an explosion, whether it's a nuke plant or firework, you've got to contain the reaction for a little while to allow pressure to build, and then when that containment structure that you built breaks, that's what causes the sound and the boom.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
because if you just, I actually did this once as a kid. After 4th of July, I went around and where the show had been going, I collected all the firecrackers and all the little bits and pieces of firework I could find, and there was always a little bit of powder left in there. And so, being a kid, I tore those open and I made a little mound of all that unburned powder, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be great." And I, to my credit, I had like a little stick. Of course, to my detriment, it was only about 4 inches long, and I lit the end of the stick and I dropped it on the powder, and it just went. Whoosh, it just did this big fizzle. And I was expecting,
My high school boyfriend liked to do that. I think maybe even when he was in high school, I forget. But yeah, he used to peel all the powder off of sparklers and put it in a can and use it to melt GI Joes. Fun times.
Huh, interesting. Was that like a political statement, or he just liked melting things?
I think he just liked melting things.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
So, but I mean, there are the most common chemicals used in fireworks, though, are detrimental to human health. They actually affect the nervous system, and they could literally lower IQ. So,
who else doesn't like them besides animals and that's what PTSD is, autistic people.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of
like fireworks.
They're
loud and bangy and not sort of a natural noise,
Right. A lot of veterans literally cannot watch fireworks shows because it can trigger things, and I don't know. It's. I mean, as a kid, I watched fireworks, and you're not troubled by any of these issues. You just think, wow, this is like human technology at its finest.
I used to really love the fireworks. Like, there's something about just being out at night in the middle of the city sometimes, like surrounded by a giant crowd of people just sitting there on the grass and looking at the sky. That was really special, and I miss it, actually. I don't know. Somebody's going to play the national anthem, and I won't get up, and there'll be trouble, so.
Yeah. Well, and so there are alternative chemicals to the ones that are most commonly used, and so that can create fireworks that are just as pretty, and there could be regulations regulating the boom part, which is the part that scares the animals and triggers people with PTSD. Right. So you could have fireworks that are much more quiet and and just as beautiful and not toxic, but that would require things like regulation.
Yeah.
That would require, people to pass laws, municipalities or states or federal laws, saying, doing it this way is harmful and hurts people and hurts the environment. So we need to pass a law saying everybody has to do it that way.
And didn't Toledo I think Ohio passed a thing where it's legal to do amateur fireworks now for like the whole month of July, I don't know, a couple weeks before the 4th or something. They just expanded it.
Yeah, well, the state government just made fireworks legal.
Right.
But so municipalities are allowed to keep them illegal, to regulate them. And Bowling Green, for example, still doesn't allow private fireworks. But one thing that can't happen now is the EPA can't say, there need to be some regulations on fireworks because the chemicals are harmful, the noises are damaging to wildlife. The Supreme Court just headed that off with this decision. So that's the kind of thing that, since it's not specifically spelled out in the Constitution, the Founding Fathers didn't say, we can't, the Environmental Protection Agency can't regulate the nasty stuff in fireworks.
So are we just basically going to have a country when it comes to attacking other countries now? Is that all it is, I get that impression.
You mean, is that the only purpose of the federal government?
Yeah.
Well, they could still regulate things that that are in law as being regulatable right now. So the EPA can still regulate things like toluene and benzene. All those nasty chemicals that there has been legislation saying those things need to be regulated. But if something new comes along, something that we didn't used to think carbon dioxide was a pollutant.
Right.
In fact, when like back in the 60s, cars used to give off horrible exhaust that had all kinds of weird and nasty petrochemicals in them. But when we got to the point using catalytic converters and changing the formulation of gasoline and changing the way the engines run, when we got to the point where exhaust was pretty much just water and carbon dioxide, we thought, hey, we've solved the air pollution problem. Except that, now it's gone a little. Now we know that more than just CO2 is involved in terms of polluting the atmosphere and making the planet unlivable, because that's the situation that we have found ourselves in. And if the federal government, if the legislature can't do something about it, the executive branch has to do something about it, because if nothing is done about it, we're not going to survive as a society. I mean, scientists are very clear on this. There will be so many storms, there will be such heat waves, there'll be so many droughts and so much flooding that we will be unable as a society to respond to, because you can only rebuild a town so many times. You can only, you can only rebuild the grid so many times, especially if you insist on rebuilding it the same inefficient way that it was built in the first place. So, and you don't decentralize your energy source when all your centralized energy grids get destroyed. If you keep trying to go back to the way it was, it will not work. So, eventually we'll run out of resources.
And Florida will be underwater fairly soon, right?
Right. And so the question is, will Ron DeSantis be president before Florida goes under? So he hit like wonders. A lifeboat there. I don't know. All right. Well, so we've been ranting for a while here, but I think we can go ahead on to our advertisers and patrons. Yay.
Okay.
All right. So, For Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways you can get in touch with them. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. You can also go to their website, wcparks.org. That's wcparks.org. They have a nifty app. Go to any nifty app store and search for WC Parks. And they're on all the social media, Twitter, Facebook, etc., etc., etc. That's the Wood County Park District. And this week, For Green Future is also brought to you by bicycles. Yes, bicycles, the most efficient way of transferring human power into mechanical energy ever devised. Bicycles can get you where you want to go without putting carbon in the air. If it's too far to hike, take a bike. So next time you need to take a trip just a few blocks away, think about hopping on your bicycle to do it, because even as it's getting you there, it's getting you in better shape. And so you'll live longer, you'll be happier, you'll have more time to spend with your friends and family. And just remember, bikes are great. For Green Future is also brought to you by our patrons. And our patrons are wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com. They searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page with all its nifty pictures and different levels of membership. They chose one that met their budget, and every month a little bit comes out of their account, comes over to us. For a lot of people, they're already doing that with things like Netflix and HBO and stuff they don't even use or watch. Why not have that come out a little bit come out and come over to help build a green future as a supporter For a Green Future? So that's patreon.com. Okay, now let's move on to Rebecca's segment. And this is definitely going to be one of your more disgusting segments.
Okay. Now we have the long, eagerly anticipated, meaning no one was anticipating it, second segment in my series about invasive worms. Having done, was it army worms before? Yeah, army worms. So yeah, I got this from an article sent to me by Valley Green. one of my Facebook friends. It's an article in the News 5 Cleveland website. And hammerhead worms have been spotted in Trumbull County, which is near Youngstown, I believe, over way the heck out east in Ohio. The one guy found them, and he's been working with the Ohio State Extension program to track them. So I guess they've actually been in Ohio since at least 2004. They're basically a worm, a big worm with a crescent-shaped head. I find them really severely unattractive. I believe I already said that, but they're in the Geoplanidae. Geoplanidae. Yeah, I had it right the first time. Shouldn't have doubted myself. They're in that. They're a genus of hammerhead worms. They're like a whole genus in the Geoplanidae family. There's a lot of different species. They all have the hammerhead, and then like you can tell by how many stripes they have or something, which specific species they are. I don't know which one they found in Trumbull County, but yeah, they secrete a neurotoxin which paralyzes their prey. And it causes skin irritation in humans and animals, and also nausea if an animal eats one, or if a human eats one. Don't eat them. I know it's tempting, but yeah. You can get rid of them with salt and vinegar. Do not touch them without gloves. Apparently there's a variation, there's a spectrum as to how much they affect individual people's skin, and how big a problem you'll have, I guess. Do not cut them in two. They can regenerate. They can reproduce asexually by being cut in two. And they're also called the wandering broadhead planaria. So we're not really aware yet of what the long-term consequences of them. They're from Southeast Asia, actually. And them being here is probably not great because they eat earthworms. You don't want that. Or, you need earthworms to till the soil for you, to aerate it and stuff. And the kind of the type species is Bipalium fuscatum, I believe, which is already in they're already in Pennsylvania and California. Some of them eat mollusks, actually, as well as I think snails and some other stuff. Yeah, slugs and insect larvae. That's what they eat. Yeah, they use their muscles and their sticky secretions to trap their prey, which just sounds disgusting and horrible. I guess, nothing good ever happens to you when you're being eaten, but it just creeps me out. They secrete enzymes to liquefy their prey, so they're like earthworms. They make you into a bag of smoothie and then slurp you up, which is always charming. They're all hermaphroditic, and they use sexual and asexual reproduction. Although some species kind of specialize in one or the other. They have preferences, like which they like to do. They're cannibalistic. If they don't have anything to eat, they'll eat each other. This is the problem. They're each other's only natural predator, basically, because nothing else wants to eat them because they make you sick. It's not good. I also found an article from Bob Vila where I learned some of the stuff I just told you, at least. They've been in the U.S. since the 1980s. They like cool, damp earth, and they feed at night. And they transmit nematode parasites, which is another not great thing that they do. They've actually been in greenhouses since 1901 in North America because they arrived on horticultural plants. But now, last year or so, they're spreading out more and more all over the place, almost like the world has become one giant greenhouse as climate change. So that's another, you're going to get a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't belong there with climate change, basically. They're found on top of the soil after a rain, just like earthworms. And if you find one, you should take a photograph of it and collect. Put on gloves. Collect it in an airtight container. Douse it with vinegar and salt, or also possibly soapy water, boric acid, neem oil, or citrus oil, and drop it in a container with that stuff and put it in the freezer for 24 hours to make good and sure it's dead. Make sure it is dissolved, it has lost structural integrity.
Wow, even getting rid of these things is disgusting. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
basically, it's just gross. So, yeah, there's some pessimism about actually being able to eliminate them because they're sneaky little buggers. By the time you realize there's anything going wrong, it's too late mostly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Once a critter like that gets into the ecosystem, it's almost impossible to get it out. Yeah. So this is not good, but also predictable. I mean, I read about these worms back in the 1980s,
Right.
and I was like, I think they're coming. Because we do not have effective regulation of cross-continent commerce. That we should not be shipping plants with their roots and all the soil and all the critters that live in those soils back and forth between continents, because it's just ecologically it's insane. Economically somebody makes a buck off it, but if we had an ecologically based legal system, we wouldn't be doing that. So. All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca, for that
You're welcome.
for that disgusting report.
It was not pretty, was it?
No.
The ones in the giraffe was more sort of happy and pretty, and
Yes.
the flowers, and this one really isn't good that way.
Right. But be on the lookout. So if you see if you see a worm that's got like a curved head to it, do not touch it. So that's important to know. Okay, on to ecological news, and this is a rare correction on For a Green Future. This only happens like once or twice a year that we get a story wrong. But the difference between us and certain news agencies is that instead of doubling down and, basically lying and said, no, what we said the first time was true, even though it obviously isn't, we will admit it. And this is a happy mistake, because a few weeks ago, I did a report about how the Australian Prime Minister was considering nuclear energy for Australia, which is...
No, Australia, no!
No, well, and the news is actually good, because what happened is I read the article a little too quickly, and I went back to get some supporting information, and it turns out it's the former Prime Minister, the one they just dumped.
Oh, thank heavens.
Yes, that said, hey, let's go nuclear. When the entire Australian subcontinent, Australia does not and never has had nuclear power, so that's a big point in their favor, even though they are the world's third largest supplier of uranium. But so that was the former Prime Minister that did that, and in fact, the energy minister of Anthony Albanese, who's the new Prime Minister, the wonderful new Prime Minister, Chris Bowen is the energy minister, and he responded to that. And I thought this quote was great. He said, "Seriously?" that's his official statement. Seriously? Question mark, exclamation point. And then he added, "Nuclear is the most expensive form of energy. We have a cost of living crisis, energy prices going through the roof, and what's their big, bright idea? Let's have the most expensive form of energy we can possibly think of."
Good one.
Yes.
Good one, Chris Bowen.
So I am very happy to be wrong about that. But what had happened is that the old Prime Minister and his political party, which is called the Nationals, they teamed up with another one of the opposition parties, which is called the Liberals, and they sent a letter to Australia's current Prime Minister saying, "Oh, we need to go nuclear, blah, 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 blah." And I thought it was interesting that even in that letter, there was gaslighting. Even in that letter, there was just a straight-out lie.
I'm surprised he didn't just go ahead and make his official statement, "Oh, hell no."
Yeah, that would be the next
Right.
statement coming down, right? But in that letter, they say that Australia is the only G20 member with a legal ban on nuclear power, which you could technically say that's true, except that both Italy and Germany, who are members of G20, have codified the official government policy as being anti-nuclear. There's laws in place in Italy and Germany. They don't specifically ban nuclear, but they say we're going to get off of nuclear. We're getting rid of nuclear. And, Italy said, we're never going to touch nuclear again in a huge referendum. So technically, Australia is the only one with a law on the books banning nuclear power. But
is that like my one friend who drinks way too much coffee and gets caffeine withdrawal headaches, and then says he's going to wean himself off by coffee by making himself another pot? or is it really actually?
Yeah. Well, no.
Do they mean that or not?
Yeah. They. Yeah. I mean, Germany is still shutting down its nukes.
Hi, Greg. You're listening.
Yeah. Germany is still shutting down its nukes. Italy has got no plans to ever put nuclear up again. It's again, it's like I say, it's gaslighting. And, the point was made that if they really thought this was a good idea, they were just in power for 9 straight years. Why didn't they pursue it then? And, of course, the answer is because it's crazy. But But so I'm happy to correct that mistake.
Does that usually stop governments, Joe?
It sometimes does. I don't know. So my apologies to Anthony Albanese. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. Okay, on to our next story. And this one comes to us from the Narwhal. And this is a sad story. There is a dam being built in British Columbia on the Peace River. It's called the Site C Dam. And the native tribes in that region have been battling this dam for decades. But what happened in 2014, British Columbia just started building it. And even though there's been massive protests and huge court battles, and the court battles are not settled, the courts refuse to tell British Columbia to stop building the dam while the court cases are settled. And so the dam is almost done. And so what happened is the native tribes that were fighting it basically gave up. The quote from the chief of the tribe is, "They beat us into submission." And this is the West Moberly First Nations tribe. So essentially what they've decided to do is take some money, take a settlement from the company that's building the dam, and they are giving up their battle. So there's a battle lost, sadly. And it's easy to say, well, they should have kept fighting anyway, because it's
or maybe you should have gotten up and gone and joined them.
Yeah, but the court might well, and it looks like they probably would have decided in favor of the native tribes, because it was very clearly that the tribes had not been, even though there's laws in the books that said they need to be consulted, they were never consulted. And so it's quite probable the court would eventually, after another 5 or 6 years, come out with a decision saying, so you guys were right, but the dam would already have been finished, and the water would be filling up, and the First Nations tribes would have had to spend millions of dollars more in legal fees and time and effort to get basically a meaningless decision. So that was why they decided to just settle. But it's still not good. This is going to flood 20 miles of the Peace River, which will cut the heart out of the fishing and hunting areas for this tribe. So sad news there. We always try to balance it out a little bit. The numbers are finally in for the decrease in CO2 emissions during COVID. Basically, in the first months of the global lockdown, from January to about October of 2020, there was a definite drop in CO2. Now, we've more than made up for that drop since then. We not only got back to the pre-COVID levels, but we kept our increase has matched what our increase would have been had we not had the COVID lockdown. But during that period of time, January to October 2020, the official number, it's been officially calculated globally, there was a 6.3% drop in CO2 emissions. So the scientists that did this study, and I found a reference to it in phys.org, with, again, terribly unwieldy title, Decrease in CO2 Emissions During Pandemic Shutdown Shows It's Possible to Meet Paris Agreement Goals. So essentially what the scientists who did the study said was, it shows that it can be done, because there are people that are arguing it's impossible and therefore we should do nothing, which is kind of crazy in its own right. I guess that's the eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die attitude towards environment.
I remember people who had that attitude in the 80s towards the nuclear arms race, and it was like, okay, so your plan is to give up and die. I don't know about that.
Yeah. Well, and the anti-nuclear movement in the 80s, they had a huge success. They stopped the spiraling arms control. I mean, even though there's still more than enough nukes to wipe out civilization, at least we stopped making more and more of them.
That's good.
So, nothing is ever hopeless until you give up, basically. And so that's what these scientists are basically saying, is that it's not hopeless. We still can meet the Paris Climate Agreement. We can hold global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade or less. It's possible. And they use this as evidence that it's possible.
I just this week ran across the old Escape Club. So I remember they were like a one-hit wonder in the 80s, and they had this one song that had this line. There's something about gotta live it up, Ronnie's got a new gun.
Okay, yeah.
Referring to good old Ronnie Ray gun.
Yeah, I haven't heard that in, decades.
Yeah.
All right, so next story, and this one touches on the whole controversy, all these hearings that they're having on Washington, D.C. about the January 6th insurrection. And, I don't like to get super political on this. That's why I haven't, this show, the focus is ecology and the environment. And that's where I like to keep the focus. I don't like to just wade too deeply into partisan politics. I mean, those things, there's other shows that do that. But one thing that's been going on in those hearings is they've been talking a lot about Jeffrey Clark. And Jeffrey Clark is being universally described in those hearings as an environmental lawyer. And that is completely inaccurate. Jeffrey Clark, even though he works in the Department of Justice in the Environmental Law Division, is an anti-environmental lawyer. I have a friend named Ben Mansky who came up with the line, calling Jeffrey Clark an environmental lawyer is like calling Jeffrey Dahmer a celebrity chef. Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, no, he spent his entire time at the Department of Justice trying to block the other Department of Justice environmental lawyers from doing anything. His biggest attempt was he opposed the regulation of greenhouse gases. He said, the Department of Justice can't get involved in that. But he also he tried to block civil and criminal charges against a company called Summit Midstream Partners, which had a huge oil pipeline in South Dakota. And because they also had drilling there, and they had the largest fracking waste spill in U.S. history, in the world history, basically. They contaminated, a huge area in South Dakota, and it was just a very clear violation of law and, very straightforward environmental justice case. And he did everything he could to keep it from being prosecuted. And it got so bad, in fact, that what happened is that the lawyers under him, because Trump appointed him to the one of the highest position in the Environmental Law Division, his underlings actually went to the Assistant Attorney General of the United States and said, "Look, our boss is blocking or trying to do and so the Assistant Attorney General, to their credit, said, "You know what? Go ahead and prosecute." And they won, because it was such a horribly clear violation. And in fact, they levied one of the highest civil fines ever in the history of the Department of Justice, $36.3 million in fines. But if this guy Jeffrey Clark had his way, that would never have happened. And he didn't really. You can't really say that he had any kind of legal theory behind blocking it. He just wanted to block it. He just wanted to protect the pipeline company from their own evil doings. And in case you were wondering what's happened to Jeffrey Clark since he resigned in disgrace from the Department of Justice, he now works for something called the New Civil Liberties Alliance, which is funded almost exclusively by the Koch Foundation, which is funded almost exclusively by selling coal to people. So basically, he's been hired by the coal industry to fight any kind of environmental regulation. So no big surprise there. But like I say, my main point is we got to stop calling this guy an environmental lawyer, because that is the furthest thing from what he actually is. Okay, next story. And this is a very sad story. Right now, there is a global avian flu epidemic going around. And again, this has been linked to global warming, that they say the temperatures are making the birds more susceptible to this flu. And up in Michigan, some species are more susceptible than others. And it turns out that the Caspian terns are actually among the most susceptible. And Caspian terns are a beautiful bird. You know, they got a black head, and they've got that nice forked tail, and they feed on little fish in the lake. And so the kids, if you live, they nest on islands in Lake Michigan. And in the last couple of weeks, the biologists from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources have been finding thousands and thousands of dead Caspian terns on the beaches of Lake Michigan.
Oh, crap.
Yeah, so it's not good. There was an article in an online publication called Bridge, Michigan on June 29th, and it turns out that the avian flu is also really hitting the cormorants hard. The cormorant, and both these birds share a habit of nesting together in groups very close together for protection and so forth. But it also means that if there's a disease, it can sweep through the whole colony. And that's what's happening to cormorants and terns in and around Lake Michigan and in Wisconsin and in other places. They're dying by the thousands. So
I have this friend on Facebook who does a bird rescue out in Colorado, and she's saying she won't take in wild birds. She specializes in exotic birds anyway, but like she mostly will not take in wild birds because she's afraid of avian flu will just like wipe out her whole rescue.
Yeah, it's a real problem. So, but there's really, since it's a viral thing, you just kind of have to wait for it to burn itself out. All right, our final story, and there will still be time for a call or a text from somebody, even as we do this final story. And that is that the Great Lakes are predicted to actually rise over the next 30 years or so, 25 years.
That could be bad for the Lake Erie Islands and coastal towns that are, big tourist places.
Yes, it could be very bad. And in fact, Lake Superior is predicted now to rise 7.5 inches. Lake Erie is predicted to rise 11 inches. And both Michigan and Huron are predicted to rise 17.3 inches. Yeah. And the old models that they were using, and I remember this model from back in the back in the 90s. It was back during the Clinton administration. I went to a presentation on global warming done by the EPA, and their predictions, I remember at the time, it's predicted increased rainfall, all right, but it also predicted dropping lake levels. And I was like, how can you have dropping lake levels if you got increased rainfall? And they said, well, it's because air with CO2 in it holds more water vapor, and so the lakes are going to evaporate faster. So that was the theory back then. But now it's been 30 years of refining the models and actually measuring things and comparing, the performance of these models against real weather history. And now they realize that because rainfall has gotten harder and there's less, it's less frequent, but when it rains so much harder. A lot more of the rain actually runs off, and all that runoff eventually ends up in the lakes because, that's where it all goes. And so that compensates for the fact that water's evaporating more quickly.
Because newsflash, water runs downhill.
Yes.
Pretty reliably.
And so now they're predicting, these huge increases in water levels, 7.5 inches for Superior, 11 inches for Erie, and 17.3 inches for Michigan and Huron. So if you're a lakeshore property owner and you've got like your dock out there and it's underwater, which is how a lot of docks are right now. Even though now right this minute, I guess the lakes have gone back to less to not so much of a flood level, but the long-term trend is definitely going to be that these flooding events are going to get more frequent. The lakeshore is going to move on, deep farther inland, and the lake levels are all going to get higher. So there you go.
The Rock Hall in Cleveland is just like right, almost just like I think it may be about 11 inches down to the lake surface from the dock ends that it's kind of on.
Yeah, and so now it'll be right on the lake, literally.
Yep.
Well, so that is about it for stuff I had planned to say. So now we're into the last few minutes of the program. Do you have any plans for the weekend, Rebecca?
Not really. Yeah, no, I'm going to make chicken tonight.
Yeah.
Those are my plans. We're going to sit on the porch like we do.
Well, people who listened to Mick Gonzalez, The Cheap Seats, last week might remember that I called in there because for the first time in my life, I got tickets to the Major League games. Yay. Not just once, but twice last week. Mm-hmm. And so I went Monday and got to witness one of the worst games in Major League history when the Guardians were destroyed by the Twins, by the Minnesota Twins, 11-1. And I have to say, it got kind of ridiculous towards the end. People were cheering for, like, even the tiniest little sliver of hope. Like, a guy got a walk, and people were, like, on their feet. And then at the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs, 11-0, the one run comes in, and it's pandemonium. People are jumping up, hugging each other, cheered like crazy. People are saying, it's comeback time, it's comeback time. But no, it wasn't. The next pitch was a line drive to first base, and they were out. And then I tried to go again on Friday, but once again, I blame global warming. We got hit by this really incredible rainstorm, and I got further this time. I had rain tickets because the first time I tried back in May, it got rained out. And now this time I went and we actually got into our seats and we were sitting there eating hot dogs and Italian sausage. And then...
You know how sports fans are. All anyone is getting out of this is that you should stop buying Indians tickets.
I don't know. I'm gonna try again. Because we got closer. See, that's the thing is that last time we didn't even get to the stadium and they canceled it. This time we were there.
You should at least say when you're going so other people don't buy tickets that day.
All right, I will. I will. But this global warming. These things, these events that disrupt our lives and prevent baseball games and things like that are happening more often. So, way back, tying back into our first, where we started talking about was that these things that are disrupting society, like these huge storms and the heat waves and all these terrible things, they disrupt things like baseball games too.
Yes,
it really definitely has an effect on having fun and not just doing things like growing food and surviving. Fun is an essential element for humans.
It used to be in the Midwest, you could really enjoy summer. You could get out and be in nature and you go sit by a lake. Now it's like you got to be either in your house or like constantly in the water.
Yeah, and it's so that's not good. But
and the water, if you're anywhere near the lakes or the rivers, sometime around the Northwest Ohio anyway, has poison green slime that'll kill your liver in it.
Yeah. Well, but today is not too bad. So, it's not too hot. So get out there. take a walk in the park. While you can. Enjoy it, enjoy it while you can, and just appreciate the nature that's there because it's still pretty cool. All right. Well, Josh, we're going to call it right there. This has been a good show. Thanks so much, Rebecca, for telling us about disgusting worms.
Anytime.
Yeah.
There's a lot of worms. I can make this a whole series.
And just a reminder, anytime you want to contact us, you can send a text or a phone call to 419-973-5841, or you can send an email to joe@DeMare foragreenfuture.org. That's JoeDemare FOR greenfuture.org. Thanks so much for listening, folks. This is Joe DeMare
and Rebecca Wood,
and we are signing off.
This country run, but that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run, but that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done.